If you allow your eyes to rest for a moment, the universe begins to feel less like a place and more like a pace. Not fast, not slow, just wide enough for thought to loosen its grip. Tonight, there is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to become. There is only distance, and the quiet way it invites the mind to soften. In that stillness, the idea of the solar system slowly unfolds, not as a diagram, not as a lesson, but as a vast breathing arrangement of space, time, and patience. Perhaps your day was full of messages, expectations, decisions that arrived without pause. Perhaps your thoughts have been circling, searching for resolution, struggling to settle. If that is true, there is nothing unusual about it. The modern mind is rarely given permission to slow down, so let this be a gentle permission. Here, in the scale of the cosmos, urgency loses its authority. The universe has never rushed, and it has never asked you to rush with it. Tonight, we are not here to memorize facts or chase understanding in a linear way. We are here to feel scale, to sense what it means when distances grow so large that the mind stops trying to dominate them and instead begins to float. The true scale of our solar system is not something the brain easily holds, and that is precisely where its quiet comfort begins. When comprehension gives way to awe, the nervous system finds room to breathe. We often imagine the solar system as crowded, as if planets sit neatly beside one another, arranged for convenience. But reality is far more spacious, far more forgiving. Between worlds lies an immense emptiness, not a cold absence, but a stabilizing pause. It is this pause that allows everything else to exist, and in a subtle way, noticing that pause can help your own inner space widen as well. As we move forward together, the journey will be slow. There will be no sudden leaps, no sharp turns, just a gradual unfolding, like eyes adjusting to darkness. Distances will stretch, time will relax, meanings will shift gently, without force. You may notice your thoughts becoming quieter as the spaces between planets grow larger in your imagination. You may notice that effort begins to dissolve on its own. Nothing in the universe is hurried, not even light. And as we begin this exploration of the true scale of our solar system, you are invited to match that rhythm, not by trying, but by allowing the vastness to carry some of the weight you've been holding, allowing perspective to arrive without demand, allowing yourself for a while to simply exist inside something much larger than your worries. So we begin not with an object, but with space itself, with the intervals, with the silence that holds everything together. And as that silence expands, one quiet question lingers gently in the background. If the universe survives through distance and patience, what might soften in you when you stop trying to rush through your own inner space? There is a moment, almost imperceptible, between one heartbeat and the next. A pause so brief that we rarely notice it, yet without it, rhythm would collapse into noise. The solar system exists in a similar way, not as a crowded collection of worlds pressed together in cosmic urgency, but as an immense arrangement of pauses, vast intervals, long, patient silences where nothing happens quickly and nothing is demanded. To begin understanding the true scale of our solar system, it helps to begin here, in the space between things rather than the things themselves. Most of us were first introduced to the solar system through images designed for clarity, not truth. Colorful diagrams where planets sit neatly side by side, each orbit drawn like a tidy ring, each world granted equal visual importance. These images are useful, but they quietly teach the wrong lesson. They suggest proximity. They imply conversation between planets, as if Mars might glance toward Earth, as if Saturn were just a short cosmic stroll away. The mind absorbs these impressions early, and they linger, shaping how we imagine space itself. But the real solar system is nothing like this. In reality, if the planets were placed side by side as shown in textbooks, the solar system would barely exist at all. It is the distances that make it what it is. If the sun were reduced to the size of a grapefruit, Earth would not be nearby. It would not be hovering close, waiting attentively. It would be tens of meters away, separated by nothing visible, nothing tangible, nothing dramatic, just space. And beyond Earth, that space would stretch on, growing quieter, wider, more patient with every step. Mars would be far enough that the connection feels thin. Jupiter would feel almost forgotten. By the time you reach the outer planets, the sun itself would have faded into something emotionally distant, a memory rather than a presence. This is the reality our diagrams rarely show. Most of the solar system is not made of planets, but of emptiness. It is tempting to think of emptiness as absence, as something missing. The human mind, shaped by rooms and walls and objects, often treats empty space as a failure of design. We fill silence with sound. We fill pauses with explanation. We fill our days with activity, often without asking why. But in the cosmos, emptiness is not a flaw. It is the structure. Without vast distances, gravity would not behave gently. Orbits would not be stable. Time itself would feel different. The solar system survives because of its intervals, not despite them. There is something quietly relieving in this idea. To realize that stability does not require constant contact, that systems can hold together without crowding, that influence does not demand closeness. The planets do not need to be near each other to remain connected to the sun. They trust the space between them, and in that trust a kind of cosmic calm emerges. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is corrected mid-motion. Everything is allowed to unfold according to a rhythm set not by urgency, but by distance. When we begin to truly imagine astronomical distances, something subtle happens inside the mind. At first, there may be resistance. Numbers appear. Millions of kilometers, hundreds of millions, billions. The brain tries to calculate, to convert, to domesticate the scale. But soon, calculation gives up. The numbers become too large to feel personal, and in that moment of surrender, the mental pace begins to slow. The mind stops chasing precision and begins to rest in impression. Far, very far, far enough that urgency no longer makes sense. This slowing is not accidental. Human anxiety is often fueled by compression. Too many tasks too close together. Too many expectations stacked without space. Too many thoughts arriving before the previous one has finished settling. The solar system offers the opposite lesson. Here, events are spaced so widely that nothing collides emotionally. Even catastrophe unfolds slowly, with advance notice measured in centuries or millennia. Space itself enforces patience. Consider the journey of light. Light moves faster than anything else we know, yet even it requires time to cross the solar system. Sunlight takes more than 8 minutes to reach Earth. That means every sunrise you have ever seen began its journey while the world was still slightly different. And beyond Earth, light continues outward, heartbeat by heartbeat, minute by minute, crossing empty regions where there is nothing to illuminate, nothing to reflect it, nothing to hurry it along. Light, too, respects the intervals. There is a common misunderstanding that emptiness is lonely. But loneliness is not caused by space. It is caused by disconnection without meaning. In the solar system, space is meaningful. Every kilometer of distance plays a role in balance. Every gap prevents chaos. The emptiness is purposeful, even elegant. It allows each planet to move freely without interference, to maintain its own rhythm without interruption. Independence and connection coexist, not as opposites, but as partners. As you imagine these distances, you may notice something happening in your body. Shoulders that were holding themselves slightly too high may begin to soften. Breathing may deepen without instruction. The mind, confronted with scales it cannot control, quietly steps back. This is not confusion. It is relief. The realization that not everything needs to be managed, monitored, or solved in order to exist properly. The solar system does not ask its planets to be productive. It does not demand efficiency. It does not reward speed. A planet can take decades, centuries, or millennia to complete its slow dance around the sun, and nothing criticizes it for that pace. There is no deadline for an orbit, no penalty for taking the long way around. The only requirement is consistency, not urgency. When we say that most of the solar system is empty, we are not diminishing it. We are describing its strength. The void is what allows gravity to speak softly rather than shout. It is what prevents constant interference. It is what gives the system resilience. And perhaps in a quieter way, it suggests something about the human need for space as well. Space between thoughts, space between obligations, space between versions of ourselves. Understanding astronomical distance does not make daily problems disappear, but it changes their texture. Worries that felt tightly packed begin to spread out. They do not vanish, but they gain breathing room. Perspective does not minimize pain, it contextualizes it. In a universe where even planets rarely meet, constant emotional collision was never the intended design. Imagine drifting outward from the sun, not quickly, not with purpose, but with curiosity. Passing Mercury, then Venus, then Earth, each separated by more space than the last. With every outward movement, the silence grows thicker, not heavier, but calmer. There are fewer signals, less noise, less demand for response. This is not abandonment, it is spaciousness. The error of imagining planets side by side is not just a scientific mistake, it is a psychological one. It teaches closeness without breathing room. It normalizes compression. The true solar system corrects this gently. It reminds us that connection does not require constant contact, and that meaning can survive immense distance. As this chapter settles, let the idea linger without pressure. The solar system is held together by what is not there, by the pauses, by the spaces where nothing happens quickly. And perhaps tonight, that same principle can apply inwardly. Perhaps there is permission to rest in the interval, to stop filling every moment, to trust that what matters can survive a little space. Between two heartbeats of light, the universe remains stable. Between two thoughts, maybe you can too. There is a quiet misunderstanding that follows us from childhood into adulthood, a belief so subtle that we rarely notice it shaping our expectations. We are taught that centers matter most, that what sits in the middle must also carry meaning, attention, and emotional gravity. In diagrams of the solar system, the sun glows at the center like a spotlight, commanding the scene, anchoring every orbit visually and conceptually. And without realizing it, the mind absorbs a familiar lesson. To be central is to be essential, to matter is to be seen, to hold things together is to stand at the center of everything. Yet the universe, in its patient honesty, offers a gentler truth. The sun is not the emotional center of the solar system. It does not narrate the story. It does not watch itself being watched. It does not demand acknowledgement. The sun simply exists as a rhythm, a steady gravitational presence that never asks to be admired. Its power is real, immense beyond human intuition, but it is quiet power. It does not pull attention toward itself in dramatic gestures. It holds, it steadies, it keeps time, and then it lets go. When planets move around the sun, they are not circling a throne. They are participating in a slow, ancient agreement. Gravity is not command, it is relationship. The sun does not force the planets to revolve in submission. Instead, it offers a constant, reliable presence, and the planets respond with motion. This distinction matters more than it seems. Control demands vigilance. Rhythm requires trust. If you imagine the solar system not as a stage, but as a dance floor, something begins to soften. There is no audience, no performer standing still at the center, demanding attention while others move around them. Instead, everything is in motion together, each body following its own pace, its own distance, its own role in the choreography. The sun is not the dancer everyone watches. It is the music no one has to think about. This shift, from center to rhythm, can feel unexpectedly relieving. Many human anxieties are rooted in the belief that we must remain central to hold our lives together, that if we loosen our grip, things will fall apart, that if we stop monitoring, managing, positioning ourselves at the emotional center of every situation, we will lose relevance or connection. But the solar system demonstrates another possibility entirely. Stability does not require constant self-reference. Balance does not depend on being watched. The sun never wonders whether it is important enough. It does not measure its value by how closely the planets look at it. In fact, most planets never see the sun the way we imagine seeing. From the outer reaches, it becomes just another bright point among many. And still, its influence remains. This is the quiet paradox. Meaning does not diminish with distance. It changes form. There is a profound difference between physical centrality and emotional significance. The sun sits near the center of the solar system's mass, but it is not emotionally invested in that position. It does not cling to it. And perhaps that is why the system remains stable for billions of years. There is no anxiety at the core, no fear of replacement, no urgency to prove relevance, just consistency. When we internalize this lesson, slowly and without pressure, it can untangle something deeply human. The need to be the emotional center of every room, every relationship, every outcome, often comes from fear rather than strength. Fear that if we are not central, we will be forgotten. Fear that influence requires proximity. Fear that rest equals irrelevance. But the sun rests constantly, and nothing collapses because of it. Consider how gently the solar system would feel from within. No alarms, no sudden commands, no central authority demanding attention, just motion unfolding at its natural pace, orbits that take years, decades, centuries to complete, each one respected, no comparison between faster and slower planets, no hierarchy of urgency. Mercury is not praised for speed. Neptune is not criticized for patience. Each is allowed to be exactly where it is. This absence of comparison is another quiet gift of the cosmic rhythm. In human life, we often mistake speed for importance. Those who move quickly seem more relevant, more alive, more valuable. But the universe does not share this bias. The slowest orbits are no less meaningful than the fastest. In fact, slowness often brings stability. Distance often brings clarity. The psychological relief of not needing to be at the center is subtle but profound. It allows attention to relax outward. It allows responsibility to distribute itself more evenly. It allows relationships to breathe. When you stop trying to anchor everything emotionally, you discover that many things are capable of holding themselves. As this idea settles, you might imagine your own life not as something that must be constantly centered around you, but as something that moves with you as part of a larger rhythm. You still matter. Your presence still influences, but it does not require tension to sustain it. Like gravity, influence can be quiet, consistent, and largely invisible. The sun does not rush to correct every deviation. When a planet wobbles slightly, the system adjusts over time, not with panic. Perturbations are absorbed gradually. Balance is restored gently. There is no dramatic intervention. This patience is built into the structure itself, and perhaps that patience is something the mind can borrow. As the solar system turns, endlessly and without commentary, it offers an invitation rather than a command. To step slightly out of the center, to loosen the need to control the narrative, to trust that presence does not require performance. The universe slows down for those who listen, and sometimes listening means allowing yourself to move with the rhythm rather than trying to conduct it. The sun shines, not to be seen, but because shining is its nature. And in that steady, unself-conscious act, everything else finds its path. If the heart of the solar system can function without emotional centrality, perhaps there is space for you to do the same, not by disappearing, but by resting into a rhythm that does not ask you to hold everything alone. As this chapter drifts toward stillness, one gentle thought remains. unhurried and unresolved. If your life did not require you to stand at the center to remain meaningful, what might finally be allowed to move freely around you? There is a particular kind of disappointment that comes from expecting something to be close, only to discover that it never quite is. Mars carries this feeling quietly. In our imagination, it often appears nearby, almost familiar, a reddish neighbor waiting just beyond Earth's orbit. We hear about it often. We see it in the night sky. We speak of missions, rovers, futures. And so the mind assumes proximity, yet the truth unfolds differently. Mars is never simply there. It is always arriving, always receding, always reminding us that closeness in the universe is rarely permanent. The distance between Earth and Mars is not fixed. It stretches and contracts as both planets move along their own paths, sometimes approaching, sometimes drifting far apart. At their closest, they are still separated by tens of millions of kilometers. At their farthest, that distance more than triples. There is no stable shortcut, no reliable nearness. Mars teaches, gently but persistently, that distance is not an obstacle to be eliminated, but a condition to be understood. Much of the frustration surrounding Mars comes from how we are shown it. Diagrams compress the solar system into something manageable, something that fits neatly on a page or a screen. Earth, then Mars, then Jupiter, all appearing as if they were beads on a string. This compression serves convenience, but it quietly reshapes expectation. When reality refuses to match the image, impatience follows. Why does it take so long? Why is the journey so complicated? Why does arrival feel endlessly deferred? In truth, the journey to Mars is not slow because of failure or inefficiency. It is slow because space is vast and motion is shared. Neither Earth nor Mars waits. Both continue moving, indifferent to human schedules. To travel between them is not to move toward a stationary destination, but to synchronize with another moving world. Timing matters more than speed. Patience matters more than power. This is why missions to Mars launch only during narrow windows that open every couple of years. These windows are not invitations, they are alignments. Moments when distance, velocity, and gravity briefly agree to cooperate. Miss the window, and the universe does not apologize. It simply asks you to wait again. There is no negotiation, only. Seen this way, interplanetary travel becomes less a technological challenge and more a lesson in humility. You cannot force the cosmos to meet your urgency. You must adapt to its timing, and this adaptation is not weakness. It is intelligence. It is listening. There is something deeply human reflected in this process. Many of the longest journeys in life cannot be rushed either. Decisions that change the course of a life often unfold slowly, requiring alignment between inner readiness and external circumstance. Push too hard, and the opportunity slips past. Wait without awareness, and the window closes quietly. Mars reminds us that timing is not passive, it is participatory. Once a spacecraft leaves Earth, there is no turning back in any simple sense. Fuel is limited. Paths are calculated long before launch. Corrections are possible, but reversal is not. In this way, interplanetary travel mirrors certain human choices. Careers chosen, relationships entered, words spoken that cannot be retrieved. The decision itself may take years to form, but once made, it carries its own gravity. Yet this irreversibility does not make the journey harsh. It makes it meaningful. The long cruise through space, months of quiet motion between worlds, is not wasted time. It is transition, a space where neither origin nor destination fully defines the experience. This in-between state is often uncomfortable for the human mind, which prefers clarity and arrival, but it is also where transformation. During the journey to Mars, there are long periods when nothing seems to happen. The spacecraft drifts, instruments hum softly, data arrives slowly. From a human perspective, it might feel uneventful, even boring. From a cosmic perspective, it is perfectly normal. Most of existence unfolds this way, quietly, gradually, without spectacle. This challenges another deeply ingrained assumption, that progress must feel active to be real. In the solar system, motion does not announce itself. A planet can travel millions of kilometers without any sense of effort. Distance accumulates invisibly. Progress is measured not in moments, but in patience. Mars also teaches us about expectation. Because it is often described as the next step, we imagine it as a reward waiting at the end of effort. But the universe does not operate on reward systems. Mars is not a prize, it is simply another world, indifferent to our anticipation. This indifference can feel cold, but it is also freeing. It releases us from the idea that meaning must be granted by arrival. The emotional training offered by Mars is subtle. It asks us to sit with anticipation without certainty, to invest energy without immediate return, to accept that effort and outcome may be separated by vast stretches of time and space. This is not a lesson taught loudly. It unfolds over months, years, decades, as missions are planned, delayed, launched, lost, and sometimes successful. And even success arrives quietly. A signal received, a confirmation tone, a delayed acknowledgement traveling across space at the speed of light, arriving minutes after the event itself has already happened. Celebration is always late in space. The universe does not synchronize itself to our emotions. As you imagine this long path between Earth and Mars, you may notice how different it feels from the hurried timelines of everyday life. Here, nothing can be expedited by anxiety. Worry does not shorten distance. Impatience does not improve alignment. The only thing that helps is waiting well. Waiting well does not mean waiting idly. It means remaining attentive without strain, prepared without tension, hopeful without demand. This is perhaps one of the hardest skills for the human nervous system to learn, and yet the cosmos practices it effortlessly. The illusion of proximity that Mars exposes is not limited to space. We often underestimate the distance between where we are and where we hope to be. We imagine progress as a straight line, forgetting that we are also in motion, that circumstances shift, that timing matters. When reality resists our expectations, frustration arises. But Mars suggests another response: recalibration rather than resistance. The long road to Mars is not meant to discourage, it is meant to reframe. Distance is not a delay imposed on us, it is a condition of existence. When we stop fighting it, we begin to learn from it. The universe does not hurry us because it does not fear being left behind. As this chapter settles into stillness, let the image of Mars remain distant, not unreachable, just patiently separate. Let the idea of long journeys soften rather than tighten your thoughts. And consider this gentle question, offered without urgency. If some paths are meant to take time, what changes when There is a quiet discomfort that often arises when we encounter something vastly larger than ourselves. It is not fear in the dramatic sense, but a subtler unease, a feeling of being reduced, overshadowed, made less significant by comparison. Jupiter carries this discomfort gently. It does not announce itself loudly, yet its presence reshapes the solar system in ways that are difficult to fully grasp. When we first learn about Jupiter, we are told that it is the largest planet, a giant among worlds. But this description, while accurate, quietly misses the deeper truth. Jupiter is not big in the way we instinctively imagine. It is simply honest about scale. It reveals how small our everyday measures really are. In images and diagrams, Jupiter often appears as a large striped sphere sitting confidently beyond the orbit of Mars. It looks impressive, certainly, but still manageable. Something the eye can hold, the mind can label. Yet if Jupiter were placed where Earth is, filling the sky as it truly would, the experience would be overwhelming in a way no picture can convey. It would not feel like an object anymore. It would feel like an environment, a presence so vast that it would redefine what it means to look upward. Jupiter's mass alone tells a story that resists intuition. It contains more than twice the mass of all the other planets combined, not added together carefully, but effortlessly surpassed. This is not dominance in a theatrical sense. It is not competition. Jupiter does not strive to be larger. It simply formed that way, gathering material in a region of the early solar system rich enough to allow such accumulation. Its size is not a statement, it is a consequence. And yet, this consequence has shaped everything around it. Jupiter's gravity reaches far beyond its visible body, extending its influence like a quiet field of intention. It bends the paths of asteroids, captures wandering objects, redirects chaos before it becomes catastrophe. Many of the impacts that might have reached the inner planets were intercepted or deflected long before they became threats. In this way, Jupiter acts as a guardian without awareness, a protector without identity. It does not know it is protecting anything. It simply exists, and that existence has consequences. This idea challenges another human assumption, that protection must be conscious to be meaningful. We often believe that to matter we must intend to matter, that value requires effort, recognition, acknowledgement. Jupiter offers a different lesson. Influence can be silent, protection can be unintentional. Importance does not require awareness of itself. The gravitational reach of Jupiter is immense, yet invisible. You cannot see it in photographs, you cannot hear it. And yet, it shapes trajectories across millions of kilometers. This invisibility mirrors something deeply human. Some of the most meaningful influences in our lives are never announced. A presence that steadies, a habit that quietly redirects, a person whose consistency alters outcomes without drawing attention. Jupiter reminds us that size is not always what we think it is. Sometimes it is measured not in appearance, but in effect. Language struggles with Jupiter. We say it is large, massive, giant, but these words belong to a human scale that breaks under the weight of planetary reality. When something becomes too large, adjectives lose their grounding. They circle the idea without touching it. Jupiter is not impressive because it is big. It is impressive because it exposes the limits of how we define bigness at all. This exposure can trigger a familiar emotional response, insignificance. When confronted with something vastly larger, the human mind often retreats into comparison. What am I next to this? How could I matter in a universe that builds objects like Jupiter without effort? These questions arise quietly, often beneath awareness, shaping how we feel more than how we think. But the universe does not operate on a hierarchy of worth based on size. Jupiter's vastness does not diminish Earth's complexity. A storm on Jupiter can be larger than our entire planet, yet it does not contain oceans of life, languages, memories, inner worlds. Size and significance occupy different dimensions. They are not interchangeable currencies. The Great Red Spot, that enormous storm raging for centuries, is often cited as evidence of Jupiter's power. It is larger than Earth itself, a single atmospheric feature that has persisted longer than human civilization. And yet, within that storm, nothing knows it exists. No awareness, no meaning, no story. Power without perspective, scale without reflection. Jupiter holds enormity, but it does not hold experience. This is where the paradox begins to soften. To feel small is not to be unimportant. It is simply to recognize scale. The discomfort arises when we confuse scale with value. The universe does not make this mistake. It allows planets to be large and minds to be small, without assigning one greater worth than the other. Each plays a role suited to its nature. Jupiter's role is not to be admired. It is to be massive enough to shape outcomes quietly. Its presence stabilizes the solar system in subtle ways, influencing orbital dynamics, absorbing impacts, shepherding debris. Without Jupiter, the inner planets might experience a very different history. Yet Jupiter does not receive gratitude. It does not require acknowledgement. It does not need to be known. There is something deeply restful in this anonymity. To exist without needing to justify that existence, to contribute without tracking recognition, to matter without measuring oneself against others. These are qualities the human nervous system rarely permits itself, and yet the cosmos practices them effortlessly. When we think small, we often mean thinking narrowly, measuring ourselves only against immediate surroundings, evaluating worth through visibility and comparison. Jupiter disrupts this habit not by demanding awe, but by quietly expanding the frame. In a universe that builds giants as a matter of course, the question shifts. It is no longer am I big enough, but am I aligned with what I am meant to be? Jupiter is not trying to be Earth. Earth is not trying to be Jupiter. Each planet expresses a different solution to existence under the same laws of physics. Diversity of scale is not a hierarchy, it is a spectrum, and within that spectrum, there is room for everything from vast gas giants to fragile, thinking beings. As you imagine Jupiter now, far from the sun, surrounded by its many moons, each with its own story and rhythm, notice how the feeling of insignificance begins to change. It may not disappear, but it softens. It becomes curiosity rather than threat, perspective rather than erasure. The realization emerges slowly. Being small does not remove you from the story. It places you within it. The solar system does not revolve around what is largest. It unfolds through relationships, balances, interactions across scale. Jupiter plays its part not by dominating attention, but by stabilizing the environment in which smaller worlds can exist. In this way, enormity serves fragility, power supports delicacy, and that perhaps is the most human lesson Jupiter offers. As this chapter settles, let the image of Jupiter remain vast, not intimidating, just expansive. Let it remind you that the universe makes room for things of every size without asking them to compete. And hold this gentle question without urgency. If feeling small does not mean being unimportant, what might you finally stop measuring and simply allow yourself to be? There are moments when emptiness feels frightening, not because it is hostile, but because it appears undefined. The human mind often associates closeness with safety and distance with loss. We learn early that what is held tightly feels secure, while what drifts away feels uncertain. Saturn quietly dissolves this assumption. From afar, it appears solid, elegant, complete, but its most iconic feature, the rings that seem to embrace it so closely, exist only because of space, not closeness, not compression, distance. When we first see Saturn's rings in images, they look like a single, continuous structure, a luminous band wrapped gently around the planet. The impression is one of unity, of wholeness, of graceful attachment. Yet this is an illusion created by distance and perspective. In reality, Saturn's rings are not solid at all. They are made of countless fragments, ranging from grains of ice to pieces as large as mountains, each one following its own orbit, each one separated from the next by precise spacing. The rings exist not because the particles are together, but because they are apart in exactly the right way. If the particles of Saturn's rings were closer, they would collide and collapse. If they were farther apart, the rings would dissolve into nothing discernible. Their beauty depends entirely on balance, on restraint, on the delicate agreement between proximity and separation. This is not a chaotic arrangement. It is a disciplined one, maintained over immense spans of time by gravity, motion, and distance, working quietly together. There is something deeply comforting in this structure once we allow ourselves to truly see it. Saturn's rings are a reminder that connection does not require fusion, that harmony does not demand sameness, that things can belong to one another without losing their individual paths. Each fragment of ice moves independently, yet together they form one of the most beautiful sights in the solar system. The fear of emptiness often arises from a belief that space equals absence. But Saturn reveals another truth. Space can be supportive. It can be the very thing that allows form to persist. The gaps between the ring particles are not failures of cohesion. They are the architecture of stability. Without those gaps, the rings could not exist. This lesson reaches far beyond astronomy. In human relationships, we often struggle with the same misunderstanding. We fear distance, interpreting it as disconnection or loss of care. We equate closeness with love, presence with meaning. But just as with Saturn's rings, too much closeness can create friction. Too little space can lead to collapse. The most enduring relationships, like the most enduring structures in the universe, are sustained by respectful distance. Saturn itself is enormous, yet its rings extend far beyond its visible atmosphere, suspended in a region where gravity is gentle enough to allow them to remain separate, but strong enough to keep them bound. This balance is not enforced. It emerges naturally from the laws of motion. Nothing in the system is straining. Nothing is being held together by effort alone. The structure persists because it is allowed to be what it is. When we speak of beauty, we often imagine something complete, something filled, something whole without gaps. Saturn challenges this idea. Its beauty is incomplete by human standards. It is full of space, full of separation, full of intervals. And yet, it is precisely this incompleteness that gives it grace. The rings shimmer because light passes between particles. They glow because space allows illumination. Imagine drifting close to Saturn's rings, not with the intention of touching them, but simply observing. You would not see a solid surface. You would see countless individual objects, each following its own quiet path, never colliding, never merging. The scene would feel calm, almost meditative. No urgency, no struggle, just motion sustained by balance. This vision invites a subtle emotional shift. The fear of emptiness begins to soften. Space is no longer something to be filled, but something to be trusted. Distance becomes a form of care. Separation becomes a way of honoring individuality. Saturn does not demand that its rings become one. It allows them to remain many. The human nervous system often resists this idea. We are taught to close gaps, to resolve distance, to eliminate space wherever possible. Silence makes us uncomfortable. Pauses feel awkward. Emotional distance can feel like danger. But Saturn offers a counterexample written across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Space is not always a problem to solve. Sometimes it is the solution. There is also fragility here. Saturn's rings are not eternal. Over immense timescales, they change. Particles collide, orbits shift. Some material falls inward, some drifts away. The rings evolve slowly, almost imperceptibly. And yet, this impermanence does not diminish their beauty. If anything, it deepens it. Beauty that depends on balance is always dynamic, always alive. This too mirrors human experience. Relationships, identities, inner states are not static. They require adjustment, recalibration, allowance for change. Trying to freeze them in one configuration leads to tension. Allowing them to move within gentle boundaries allows harmony to persist. Saturn's rings also teach us about boundaries. There are regions where rings cannot form, where gravity disrupts cohesion. These gaps are not failures. They are necessary. They prevent instability. In life, boundaries serve a similar role. They are not barriers meant to isolate, but structures that allow connection to exist without collapse. As you imagine Saturn now, distant and silent, surrounded by its luminous rings, notice how the idea of emptiness begins to feel different. Not hollow, not threatening, but intentional, designed, supportive. The space between the particles is not wasted. It is doing essential work. Perhaps this perspective can be carried inward. The spaces between thoughts, the pauses between words, the distance between moments of effort. These are not voids to be feared. They are what allow clarity, meaning, and calm to emerge. Without them, everything blurs into noise. Saturn does not rush its rings. It does not pull them closer in an attempt to feel complete. It allows them to exist at a distance that sustains beauty, and in that allowance, something remarkable persists for millions of years. As this chapter gently settles, let the image of Saturn remain not as an object to admire, but as a quiet lesson in balance. Let it remind you that sometimes what holds things together is not closeness but space. And hold this question softly, without the need for an answer. If distance can create beauty in the cosmos, where in your own life might space be doing more good than you realize? There is a kind of fatigue that does not come from effort alone, but from constant noise. Not only the noise of sound, but the noise of information, expectation, inner dialogue that never fully settles. The mind becomes crowded, not because too much is happening, but because too little space is allowed between what happens. Beyond Saturn, the solar system begins to offer a different atmosphere entirely. Here, distance increases dramatically. Light weakens, motion slows, and in that growing cold, something unexpected emerges. Not hostility, not danger, but silence. A silence so vast and consistent that it begins to feel instructive. Uranus arrives first, tilted and distant, rotating in a way that seems almost indifferent to convention. It does not align itself neatly. It does not behave as diagrams suggest planets should. Its axis lies nearly on its side, causing seasons that last decades, hemispheres that endure long years of light, followed by long years of darkness. Uranus does not hurry to balance itself for observers. It simply continues, quietly, following its own orientation through space. The cold here is not sudden. It arrives gradually, like a sound fading rather than stopping. With each outward step beyond Saturn, the warmth of the sun becomes less emotionally present. Light still arrives, but it feels thinner, more distant, less insistent. The solar system transitions from brightness into restraint. This is not the absence of energy. It is energy expressed gently, without urgency. Uranus is often described as strange, unusual, even unsettling. Its color, its tilt, its remoteness all contribute to this perception. But this strangeness is only relative to expectation. In the broader context of the universe, Uranus is simply another expression of possibility. It reminds us that normal is a narrow category, defined more by familiarity than by truth. The farther we travel, the quieter everything becomes. Signals take longer to arrive. Spacecraft slow their conversations with Earth to brief check-ins, separated by long stretches of waiting. Communication itself adapts to distance, becoming sparse, intentional, unhurried. This is not inefficiency, it is respect for scale. Neptune waits even farther out, a deep blue presence at the edge of what once felt imaginable. Its orbit takes so long that a single year there spans more than a human lifetime. Neptune has completed only one full orbit around the Sun since its discovery. Time, at this distance, behaves differently, not because physics changes, but because perception does. The cold at Neptune is extreme, yet it is not violent. Winds can be fierce, but they unfold within a system that is otherwise profoundly quiet. There is no crowding here, no competition, no overlapping orbits demanding negotiation. Each world moves alone, accompanied only by its moons and the faint, persistent pull of the sun, now reduced to a bright point among many. This region of the solar system reveals something counterintuitive. Silence is not emptiness. It is presence without intrusion. In the inner solar system, interactions are frequent. Gravitational influences overlap. Objects pass close enough to matter. Out here, space stretches wide enough to absorb disturbance. Motion continues, but it does not collide emotionally. For a mind exhausted by constant stimulation, this vast quiet holds a particular comfort. There is no demand to respond quickly, no expectation of productivity, no pressure to remain visible. The outer planets exist far from attention, and yet they are no less real for it. Their existence does not depend on being observed. The idea that cold suggests hostility is a deeply human projection. We associate warmth with safety because of our biological needs, but the universe does not share our preferences. Cold is simply a state of lower energy exchange. It is calm in thermal form. At great distances from the sun, matter settles into slower motion, less agitation, more stillness. The cold does not attack, it rests. In these regions, the solar system begins to resemble a gradient of silence. Not an abrupt shift, but a gentle tapering away from noise. Each planet farther out experiences fewer interactions, longer timescales, wider separations. Nothing is crowded, nothing is rushed. This gradient teaches something subtle. Silence is not a void to be filled, but a condition that allows complexity to endure without strain. The human mind often resists silence because it removes distraction. Without noise, thoughts surface more clearly. Emotions that were masked by busyness become visible. This can feel uncomfortable at first, but given time, silence becomes spacious rather than threatening. The outer solar system embodies this spaciousness on a scale that dwarfs human concerns. Uranus and Neptune do not offer spectacle in the way Jupiter or Saturn do. Their beauty is quieter, more reserved. It is the beauty of restraint, of distance honored, of motion unobserved yet continuous. They do not compete for attention. They do not announce their presence loudly, and yet they are essential chapters in the story of our cosmic neighborhood. There is also humility in this region. The farther we move outward, the less the solar system seems designed for us. Temperatures fall beyond survivability. Light weakens beyond comfort. Familiar landmarks fade. This is not rejection, it is perspective. A reminder that the universe does not revolve around human preference, and in that realization, something relaxes. The burden of centrality lifts. The value of places where almost nothing happens is often overlooked. In human terms, we measure importance by activity, by events, by visible change. But the outer solar system challenges this metric. Here, stability arises from inactivity, continuity from slowness, meaning from persistence rather than progress. Neptune's long orbit, its distant companionship with the sun, suggests a different relationship with time, one that does not count moments anxiously, but allows them to pass without commentary. A single season on Neptune outlasts generations. There is no rush to experience everything at once. Existence unfolds gradually, with patience built into the structure itself. As you imagine these distant worlds, surrounded by immense darkness and silence, notice how the idea of quiet shifts within you. It may no longer feel like absence. It may begin to feel like rest, the kind of rest that does not require sleep, only permission. The solar system does not fear silence. It uses it. It depends on it. Without vast, quiet regions, gravitational interactions would become chaotic. Stability would break down. Silence is not a luxury here. It is infrastructure. Perhaps this is why thinking about the outer planets can feel calming even when they are so far removed from human life. They model a way of existing that does not rely on constant engagement. They remind us that it is possible to matter without noise, to persist without urgency, to be present without performance. As this chapter gently drifts toward stillness, let the cold of Uranus and Neptune feel less like isolation and more like spacious calm. Let the silence they inhabit soften the inner noise you may have carried here. And hold this quiet question, without pressure or expectation: if there are regions of the universe where almost nothing happens, and yet everything remains in balance, what might you allow to become quieter within yourself tonight? There is a quiet fear that surfaces when we approach the idea of an edge. Not a sharp edge, not a sudden drop, but the suggestion that something familiar might eventually thin out, dissolve, or give way to the unknown. The human mind often prefers clear borders. We like doors that close, lines that end, moments that resolve cleanly. The universe, however, does not share this preference. At the farthest reaches of the solar system, there is no wall, no final marker, no definitive moment when here becomes elsewhere. Instead, there is a gradual softening, a slow dimming, a night that begins so gently that it is difficult to say exactly when day has ended. Beyond Neptune, the sun no longer feels like a presence. It becomes a bright memory, a point of light no more commanding than countless others scattered across the sky. Gravity still holds, but its grip is subtle, almost polite. Objects out here do not rush. They drift, they linger. They take their time crossing distances that make inner orbits feel hurried by comparison. This region does not announce itself as a boundary. It behaves more like a whisper. The outermost regions of the solar system are often spoken of as if they were a frontier, a line to be crossed. But this language is misleading. There is no frontier in the sense of a threshold that demands courage to step beyond. There is only transition, a gradual change in density, in influence, in familiarity. The solar system does not end, it thins. The Oort cloud, often described as a distant shell of icy remnants, exists more as an idea than a destination. No spacecraft has visited it. No image has captured it directly. Its presence is inferred, not observed. It is suggested by the behavior of comets, by the subtle mathematics of orbits that begin far beyond where planets roam. In this way, the Oort cloud mirrors many of the things that shape human experience most profoundly, unseen, distant yet influential. What makes the Oort cloud so different from everything that came before is not its content, but its scale. It extends so far that the distinction between the solar system and interstellar space becomes blurred. Objects here may take thousands, even millions of years to complete a single orbit. Time stretches until it no longer feels like motion, but like stillness. This is where the idea of an ending begins to soften. If the solar system ended abruptly, it might feel final, even frightening. But instead, it fades. Influence weakens gradually. Familiar patterns lose their dominance. There is no moment of exile, no sudden loss of belonging. The sense of home dissolves slowly enough that nothing feels torn away. For a mind that fears endings, this matters deeply. Much of human anxiety around the unknown is rooted in abruptness, sudden change, unanticipated loss, sharp transitions that leave no time to adjust. The cosmos offers a different model. Even on its largest scales, it respects transition. It allows time for adaptation. It does not rush goodbye. Imagine drifting outward through these distant regions. The planets are long behind you. Their orbits feel like memories rather than landmarks. The sun is no longer a source of warmth, only a reference point. Light still reaches you, but it carries little comfort. And yet, there is no sense of danger, only quiet, only space, only the feeling of being held loosely rather than tightly. The Oort cloud is sometimes described as the solar system's outermost neighborhood, but even this is a simplification. It is less a place than a condition, a region where the sun's influence competes gently with that of passing stars and the galaxy itself. Objects here belong not entirely to one system, but to a conversation between many. They exist in between. This in-between quality is often uncomfortable for human thinking. We like categories. We like clarity. We prefer to know whether something belongs or does not. The Oort cloud resists this binary. It exists in a state of partial attachment, neither fully bound nor fully free. And in that ambiguity it remains stable for billions of years. There is a lesson here that does not arrive loudly. Belonging does not always require tight boundaries. Home does not always have walls. Sometimes home is defined by gradual influence rather than firm containment. The solar system does not expel its distant members. It allows them to linger at the edge of its reach, connected without being constrained. The night begins slowly here, not as a sudden darkness, but as a gentle thinning of light. Stars become more prominent, not because there are more of them, but because the sun finally steps back enough to let them speak. The sky grows deeper. Perspective widens. The familiar becomes one point among many. For someone lying awake at night, wrestling with thoughts of endings, of change, of what lies beyond the known, this cosmic behavior offers quiet comfort. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when understanding no longer asks to be expanded. After distances have stretched beyond comprehension, after orbits have slowed into centuries, after edges have softened into transitions, something gently turns inward, not as a retreat, but as a return. The universe does not ask you to carry its vastness with effort. It offers it to you the way night offers rest, not as a command, but as an invitation. By now, the solar system may no longer feel like a collection of objects. It may feel more like a tempo, a pacing, a long breath taken without urgency. The sun no longer demands attention. The planets no longer rush past one another. Even the edge no longer feels sharp. Everything has slowed enough to reveal what was always there beneath the motion: space that holds, time that waits, and silence that does not threaten. In this quiet, scale stops being something to understand and becomes something to lean into. The mind, which began this journey trying to grasp distances and relationships, may now feel less interested in holding anything at all. Thoughts loosen, definitions blur. The need to follow each idea to its conclusion gently dissolves. This is not confusion, it is saturation. When perspective becomes wide enough, effort becomes unnecessary. The true scale of the solar system was never meant to be mastered. It was meant to humble without diminishing, to calm without erasing, to remind without overwhelming. When the distances became too large to visualize, something important happened. Control gave way to trust. The mind learned that it could rest inside uncertainty without falling apart. This is how the universe teaches best, not through instruction, but through exposure. It does not explain patience, it demonstrates it. It does not argue for stillness, it embodies it. Every orbit, every interval, every long silence between worlds quietly reinforces the same message: nothing essential is in a hurry. If you notice now that your breathing feels slower, that your body feels heavier against whatever supports it, this is not coincidence. The nervous system responds to scale. When the world grows large enough, the small alarms lose their authority. Worries do not disappear, but they soften. They find proportion. They find space. The solar system does not ask you to feel insignificant. It asks you to feel situated, placed within something that does not depend on your vigilance to continue. You are not required to hold the universe together. You are allowed to rest inside it. In the vast emptiness between planets, there was structure. In the silence beyond Neptune, there was calm. At the fading edge, there was gentleness. These were not exceptions, they were patterns. And those patterns are not limited to space. They echo inward. Human life often feels compressed, days packed tightly together, thoughts arriving before the previous ones have finished settling, emotions layered without pause. The cosmos offers a counterexample written across billions of kilometers. Spacing is not wasted time. It is what allows things to endure. Here, at the end of this long drift through the solar system, there is no final revelation waiting, no summary to memorize, no conclusion to resolve. The universe does not conclude, it continues. And it allows you to continue as well, without demanding clarity before rest. You may find that your thoughts no longer follow a straight line. They may circle gently or drift or fade in and out. This is not something to correct. This is what happens when the mind is no longer bracing itself against urgency, when there is finally room to wander. Sleep often arrives not because we chase it, but because we stop standing in its way. The same is true of calm. The universe did not slow down for you tonight. It simply revealed that it was never fast to begin with. As attention turns inward again, the scale you explored does not vanish. It remains quietly available, like a horizon you can return to whenever the world feels too tight. The memory of distance becomes a refuge, a reminder that perspective exists beyond the immediate moment. The solar system will continue its patient motion whether you think about it or not. Planets will keep their distances. Light will keep taking its time. Edges will keep dissolving rather than ending. You are free now to let go of the journey, knowing it does not require your supervision. And so, without closing anything firmly, without drawing a line or offering an answer, this reflection simply rests with you. In a universe this vast, there is room for everything you feel. In a cosmos this patient, there is no need to rush towards sleep, understanding, or resolution. What if the true scale of the solar system was never meant to make you feel small, but to remind you that there is enough space for you to finally be at rest? There is no signal that tells you the journey is complete, no sound, no marker, no closing gate. After traveling outward through space, after feeling distances stretch until they lose their sharpness, what remains is not an ending but a lingering presence. The universe does not escort you back with instructions. It simply stays wide and quiet, allowing you to remain as long as you need. This chapter is not a new destination. It is a place to rest within what has already been felt. At this point, the solar system may no longer appear as a structure you are observing from the outside. It may feel closer to something you are floating within. The sun, the planets, the empty distances between them are no longer separate ideas. They blend into a single impression of spaciousness, a sense that there is room for thought to slow down without disappearing, room for awareness to soften without losing itself. The mind often believes it needs closure in order to rest, a conclusion, a final understanding, but the universe rarely offers closure in that form. It offers continuation instead. Orbits do not conclude, they repeat. Distances do not resolve, they persist. Even edges do not end, they fade. And somehow this lack of finality is what allows calm to arrive. You may notice that your thoughts now move differently. They do not line up in orderly sequences. They drift. They overlap gently. Some appear only briefly before dissolving, others linger without urgency. This is not disorder. It is the mind mirroring the environment it has been immersed in. After absorbing cosmic scale, linear thinking loosens its hold. The solar system never asked you to follow it closely. It never required attention at every moment. It existed whether it was watched or not. In the same way, your inner world does not need constant supervision to remain intact. Feelings can rise and fall without being managed. Thoughts can pass without being examined. Awareness can remain open without being strained. Night does not arrive by force. It settles. Sleep, when it comes naturally, does not announce itself. It slips in quietly, often unnoticed until it is already there. The universe models this process on every scale. Dusk fades into darkness, motion slows without stopping. Activity gives way to stillness without resistance. As you remain here, there is no expectation that you remember everything that has been said. Understanding is not the goal. The experience itself is enough. The nervous system does not need facts. It needs permission to stop bracing. The vastness you have moved through tonight is not something you leave behind. It becomes part of the background, a quiet reference point you can return to without effort. When worries feel too close together, when thoughts feel crowded, the memory of distance remains available. A reminder that space exists beyond the immediate moment. The universe does not measure your productivity. It does not track your progress. It does not reward speed or punish stillness. It simply continues, indifferent in the most gentle sense of the word. And in that indifference there is freedom. You are not required to be anything other than present. If sleep comes, let it come without ceremony. If wakefulness remains, let it remain without judgment. The night is not in a hurry either. Time stretches differently here, unmeasured, uncounted. The solar system will keep moving through its vast intervals long after this moment passes. The sun will continue its steady rhythm. The planets will maintain their distances, the edge will continue to soften into darkness. Nothing depends on your attention to proceed. And so, without concluding, without summarizing, without closing a door, this space simply stays open, wide enough for rest, quiet enough for release, patient enough to hold whatever remains. In a universe where even light takes its time, what might happen if you allow yourself to do the same tonight? There comes a point, often unnoticed, when the desire to move forward quietly dissolves. Not because there is nowhere left to go, but because movement itself no longer feels necessary. After traveling through scale, distance, rhythm, silence, and fading edges, the mind reaches a state where continuation does not require novelty. It only requires presence. This is not stagnation, it is arrival without destination. The universe has no obligation to keep you engaged. It does not escalate to hold attention. It does not introduce new spectacle when silence becomes complete. Instead, it remains steady, allowing awareness to rest inside what already exists. This is a difficult lesson for a mind shaped by constant stimulation, but it is a generous one. It teaches that meaning does not always deepen through addition. Sometimes it deepens through remaining. At this stage of the night, the solar system may feel less like a subject and more like a background condition, something steady and expansive, quietly holding the edges of thought. You are no longer traveling outward or inward. You are simply within scale, within slowness, within a rhythm that does not require interpretation. The human nervous system often believes that alertness must be maintained, that something might be missed if attention relaxes too much. But the universe misses nothing by being still. It does not scan its surroundings. It does not monitor itself. It trusts its own continuity, and that trust is what allows it to endure. Remaining with the quiet can feel unfamiliar at first. Without progression, the mind searches for purpose. It asks, quietly or loudly, what comes next? But here, the answer is gentle and unremarkable. Nothing needs to come next. Existence does not depend on sequence in this moment. It depends only on allowance. You may notice now that time feels less structured. Minutes lose their edges. Thoughts no longer arrive with the same insistence. Some may repeat softly, like distant echoes, while others fade before forming fully. This is not something to manage. This is the mind learning to float. In the solar system, there are regions where change is almost imperceptible. Orbits so vast that motion can only be measured across generations. Temperatures so stable that nothing dramatic interrupts them. These regions are not empty of meaning. They are full of duration, full of patience extended across unimaginable spans. To remain with the quiet is to participate briefly in that duration, to allow your own internal pace to align with something far older and slower than urgency. The body responds to this alignment instinctively. Muscles release without instruction. Breathing settles without effort. Awareness becomes wide without strain. There is no achievement in this state, no accomplishment to claim. That is part of its relief. You are not required to do anything with the calm once it arrives. You do not need to preserve it. You do not need to explain it. It is not fragile. Like the universe itself, it does not depend on your attention to persist. The solar system does not rush to fill silence with events. Most of its time is spent in quiet repetition. Planetary motion repeats. Distances remain. Light continues traveling patiently. The extraordinary is sustained by the ordinary. Stability is built from consistency, not intensity. If wakefulness remains, let it remain without interpretation. If sleep approaches, let it arrive without ceremony. The night does not require you to choose. It accommodates both states easily. Consciousness and rest are not opposites here. They are neighboring conditions, separated by very little distance. The fear of nothing happening is deeply human. We associate stillness with stagnation, silence with emptiness, rest with loss of momentum, but the cosmos offers a different association. Stillness is not absence, it is equilibrium. Silence is not void, it is space, Rest is not regression, it is maintenance. Remaining here with no demand to move on is not wasting time. It is inhabiting it, allowing it to stretch without resistance, letting it exist without measurement. This is how deep calm forms, not through effort, but through permission. The solar system does not conclude its nights. Darkness does not resolve into something else. It simply holds until light returns naturally. And even then, nothing announces the transition sharply. Everything remains gradual. As this chapter lingers, there is no need to remember where the journey began. That information is no longer required. What matters is the feeling of being held by something larger that does not intrude, a sense that you are allowed to pause without consequence. And so this space remains open, quiet, uninsistent, wide enough for thought to rest, for awareness to drift, for sleep to arrive if it wishes. In a universe that continues without urgency, what might it feel like to let yourself continue the same way, without asking anything more of this moment? At some point in the night, effort quietly releases its grip, not because it was defeated, but because it is no longer required. The universe does not reward striving at this hour. It does not respond to tension with clarity. Instead, it offers something far simpler and far older: support without instruction. This chapter exists within that offering. It is not a progression forward, nor a return backward. It is a suspension, a gentle floating, where nothing needs to be carried deliberately anymore. When effort fades, awareness changes shape. It becomes less pointed, less concerned with direction. Thoughts no longer line up as problems waiting to be solved. They resemble clouds instead, appearing, thinning, drifting apart. Some dissolve before fully forming. Others linger softly without insisting on attention. The mind is not losing control, it is redistributing it. The solar system has been doing this all along. It does not grip its components tightly. Gravity holds, but it does not clutch. Influence extends, but it does not demand obedience. Planets remain in motion not because they are forced to move, but because movement is the most natural expression of balance. Even stillness in space is a kind of motion, just spread thin across time. Here, drifting is not a failure to act, it is alignment. The body understands this instinctively. When tension dissolves, muscles release in small, quiet increments. Breathing deepens without instruction. Weight settles more fully into whatever surface holds it. These changes do not need to be monitored. They happen because the environment has become safe enough to allow them. The mind often believes it must remain vigilant to prevent something from going wrong. But vigilance is exhausting, and the universe does not practice it. It does not scan for threats continuously. It responds when necessary and remains at rest otherwise. Most of cosmic existence unfolds without alertness, and yet stability persists. Drifting without effort is not the same as losing awareness. It is awareness without agenda. Perception remains, but it does not grasp. Sensation continues, but it does not demand interpretation. This is the state the night naturally encourages and the cosmos quietly endorses. In deep space, objects travel for millions of years without guidance, following trajectories set long ago. They do not correct themselves constantly. They trust the initial conditions and the consistency of physical law. There is something deeply reassuring in this trust. It suggests that not every moment requires adjustment, that some paths, once set, can be allowed to unfold. Human life rarely feels this simple. We interrupt ourselves constantly with evaluation. Are we doing enough? Are we too slow? Are we missing something? These questions arise from a compressed sense of time, where everything feels urgent because everything feels close. Cosmic scale dissolves that compression. It stretches time until urgency loses its meaning. Here, drifting becomes possible because the frame has widened. The night does not expect performance. The universe does not measure progress. There is no standard to meet, no outcome to secure. There is only continuation, and continuation does not require effort in every moment. As awareness floats, it may settle briefly on images from the journey, the sun as rhythm rather than center, the long road to Mars unfolding patiently, Jupiter shaping outcomes without awareness, Saturn's rings balanced by space, the cold silence beyond Neptune, the fading edge where night begins slowly. These are not lessons to remember, they are textures the mind has touched, and now they fade gently into background. The mind does not need to hold them, they have already done their work. Perspective does not require maintenance. Once introduced, it remains quietly available, like gravity itself. In drifting, there is also a subtle return to the body. Sensations that were ignored earlier become noticeable without urgency. The warmth of the room, the weight of limbs, the softness or firmness beneath you. These sensations do not ask to be changed. They simply exist, steady and unremarkable. The body, like the universe, prefers consistency over intensity. Sleep often arrives from this state, but it is not the goal. Drifting is complete even without sleep. Rest does not always require unconsciousness. Sometimes it requires only the absence of resistance. The universe does not rush transitions. It does not snap from one state to another. Everything moves through gradients. Heat becomes cool, light becomes dim, motion becomes slow, awareness becomes diffuse. This chapter lives inside one of those gradients. There is no edge to cross, only a gradual easing. If a thought arises now, let it arise. If it fades, let it fade. There is no need to follow it. The universe does not follow every particle it influences. It allows systems to self-regulate. The mind can do the same when given permission. Drifting without effort is not something to learn. It is something to remember. A state the nervous system knows well from early life, before urgency was taught, before productivity became a measure of worth. The cosmos does not recognize those measures. It recognizes only balance. In the vastness you have been immersed in, balance is achieved not by constant correction, but by allowing forces to settle into their natural relationships. This is as true for thoughts as it is for planets. As this chapter continues to rest without direction, there is nothing further to add, nothing to emphasize, nothing to conclude. The space itself is doing the work now. And if, at some point, awareness slips gently into sleep, it will not be an interruption. It will be a continuation, carried forward by the same patience that moves planets and dims stars at the edge of night. In a universe that drifts so gracefully through time, what might it feel like to trust that you, too, can be carried without effort for a while longer? There is a phase of the night when even drifting becomes too active a word. Movement feels unnecessary, and stillness no longer feels like something achieved. It simply is. At this point, awareness does not expand or contract. It rests, not tightly, not loosely, but naturally, like an object that has finally settled into its most stable position. The universe has no objection to this state. In fact, it has been quietly modeling it all along. Immensity, when first encountered, can feel overwhelming. Vast distances, immense time scales, incomprehensible sizes. But once the mind stops trying to map them, something gentler emerges. Immensity becomes containment rather than threat. It holds awareness the way deep water holds a body that has stopped struggling. There is no effort required to stay afloat. The support is already there. The solar system does not lean forward into the future. It does not anticipate its next moment with tension. Each orbit unfolds without expectation. The present is sufficient, and in that sufficiency time loses its sharp edges. Seconds no longer feel like units to be spent wisely or wasted carelessly. They become texture, a soft medium in which experience rests. Here, awareness no longer needs direction. Direction implies a destination, and destination implies lack. But nothing is lacking in this moment. The mind does not need to move toward calm. Calm has already arrived by the simple act of not being resisted. The universe does not chase equilibrium, it allows it. In deep space, far from stars, there are regions where almost nothing changes. Not because motion has stopped, but because motion has become evenly distributed. No gradient strong enough to create drama, no contrasts sharp enough to demand attention. These regions are not dead, they are balanced, they are the cosmic equivalent of rest. The human nervous system recognizes this balance intuitively. When stimulation decreases without threat, vigilance fades, muscles release their readiness, breathing finds a rhythm that does not need to be counted. The mind stops checking itself. Awareness remains, but it is no longer busy being aware. This state is often mistaken for emptiness. But emptiness implies absence, and this is not absence. It is fullness without clutter, presence without commentary, experience without narration. The universe does not narrate itself. It does not label its phases. It does not announce significance. It simply continues, moment by moment, without asking to be interpreted. If a thought arises now, it may feel distant, as if it belongs to someone else, not because it is rejected, but because it no longer feels urgent. Thoughts lose their adhesive quality. They do not stick. They pass through awareness the way distant stars pass through the field of view when drifting slowly through space. Seen, but not approached. The idea that something must be happening in order for rest to be valid is a deeply learned one. Productivity culture, survival instincts, social conditioning all reinforce the belief that stillness must justify itself. But the universe does not justify its stillness. It treats it as default. Most of cosmic time is quiet. Most of existence is unremarkable, and that is precisely why it endures. Here, resting inside immensity means allowing yourself to be unremarkable for a while. Not exceptional, not improving, not fixing, just existing within a larger context that does not evaluate you. This can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling at first, but gradually it becomes relieving. The solar system does not ask its planets to explain themselves. It does not compare their paths. It does not reward efficiency or punish delay. Each orbit is accepted as it is. Each distance is respected. There is no hierarchy of urgency written into the structure of space. As awareness rests, you may notice that the sense of self softens at the edges. Not disappearing, but becoming less defined. This is not loss, it is expansion without effort. Identity relaxes when it no longer needs to defend itself against time. The universe does not hurry you back into definition. It does not require you to know who you are in this moment. It allows ambiguity. It allows half-formed impressions. It allows rest without clarity. Night itself functions this way. Darkness does not sharpen outlines. It blurs them gently. Objects lose their insistence. Boundaries soften. The world becomes less demanding. This is not deprivation. It is permission. In this chapter, nothing new is introduced because nothing new is needed. The experience has reached a point where addition would feel intrusive, like turning on a bright light in a room that has finally grown comfortable in dimness. The vastness that once felt distant is now close in a different way, not near, but intimate. It is no longer something you are looking at. It is something you are inside of. The distinction matters. Observation requires effort. Immersion does not. If sleep comes now, it will come gently, not as collapse but as continuation. If it does not, rest is still happening. Awareness can remain awake and rested at the same time. These states are not mutually exclusive here. The universe does not require resolution before rest. It does not insist that questions be answered before night deepens. It allows uncertainty to remain open, suspended without strain. That allowance is part of its stability. As this chapter remains open and unhurried, there is nothing to conclude, no insight to extract, no message to remember. The value lies in the state itself, not in what is taken from it. Resting inside immensity means trusting that you are held by something larger that does not need your participation to continue. It will carry on whether you think about it or not, and for now, that is enough. In a universe where balance is achieved through allowance rather than effort, what might happen if you allow this moment to remain exactly as it is, without asking anything more from it? There is a subtle moment in long nights when time loosens its grip. Clocks still exist, of course, minutes still pass, but the inner sense of being measured begins to fade. Time no longer feels like something that is happening to you. It becomes something you are resting inside. The universe has always treated time this way, not as a taskmaster, not as a countdown, but as a wide field in which events unfold without pressure. From the perspective of the solar system, time is generous. Orbits are not hurried. Alignments are not forced. Even dramatic events, collisions and migrations unfold across spans so long that urgency loses meaning. The night you are in now borrows that generosity. It asks nothing of you. It does not expect progress. It does not demand resolution before it allows rest. So much human tension comes from the feeling of being behind schedule, behind expectation, behind some invisible standard that keeps moving forward. But the cosmos does not run ahead of itself. It does not compare one moment to the next. Each moment is complete enough to exist on its own. This completeness is quiet, but it is real. When time widens, the body notices first. Heartbeat steadies. Breath becomes less intentional. Muscles stop preparing for the next demand. These changes do not need encouragement. They happen when the sense of being evaluated recedes. When nothing is asking you to hurry, the nervous system finally believes it can slow down. The solar system never feels late. A planet does not worry about missing its orbit. A comet does not rush to return. Even light, moving faster than anything else, does not arrive early or late. It arrives when it arrives. The universe does not reward speed, it accommodates it. As awareness settles into this widened sense of time, the idea of productivity begins to feel strangely irrelevant. The night is not something to be used well or poorly, it is something to be inhabited. The value of this moment does not depend on what you do with it. It exists regardless. You may notice now that thoughts no longer cluster tightly. They spread out, leaving space between them. Some may revisit familiar concerns, but they arrive with less intensity, as if they too have noticed that time is no longer pressing. Others dissolve before becoming fully formed. This is not avoidance, it is proportion. When the universe is taken seriously on its own terms, it becomes impossible to believe that every thought requires immediate attention. The scale itself enforces selectivity. Only what truly matters can hold focus for long. Everything else is allowed to pass. Letting time widen also changes how the past and future feel. Memories lose some of their sharpness. Anticipation loses its edge. The present grows thick enough to hold awareness comfortably. This thickness is not heaviness. It is support. In astronomy, there are moments when time seems to stand still, not because nothing is happening, but because change is too slow to perceive. A star aging over billions of years, a galaxy drifting imperceptibly through space. These processes are real, but they do not demand attention in each instant. They trust time to do its work. The night offers the same trust. You do not need to manage your inner processes moment by moment. Emotions, like orbits, have their own momentum. Thoughts, like passing objects, will come and go. Nothing requires constant correction. When time stops measuring you, self-judgment loosens. The inner voice that keeps score grows quieter. There is less need to explain yourself, even to yourself. Existence becomes simpler when it is not being assessed. The solar system does not ask whether it is doing enough. It does not worry about efficiency. It does not optimize its paths for convenience. It follows the curves set by gravity and initial conditions, and that is enough. Stability emerges from consistency, not from striving. As you remain here, in this widened night, there is no advantage to staying awake or falling asleep. Both are equally acceptable. Awareness can hover lightly, or it can fade. The universe will continue either way. Time, when allowed to widen, becomes less personal. It stops pressing against identity. You are no longer racing it or being chased by it. You are simply within it, like everything else. This is perhaps one of the most comforting truths the cosmos offers. You are not out of time. You are not behind. You are not required to catch up. The night is long enough to hold you exactly where you are. As this chapter continues without urgency, let the sense of being measured continue to dissolve. Let time be wide enough that nothing needs to be proven inside it. In a universe where even stars take their time becoming what they are, what would it feel like to let this night unfold without asking whether you are doing it right? There is a quiet relief that arrives when expectation finally loosens its grip. Not because everything has been resolved, but because nothing is demanding resolution anymore. This is a different kind of calm, one that does not come from answers, progress, or reassurance. It comes from the absence of requirement, from the realization that, for this moment, nothing is being asked of you at all. The universe lives permanently in this state. It does not wake each moment with a list of objectives. It does not carry a sense of unfinished business. Stars do not feel pressure to shine more efficiently. Planets do not feel compelled to justify their orbits. Space itself does not worry about being filled. Existence unfolds without obligation, and yet it unfolds with remarkable coherence. For much of human life, obligation becomes so familiar that it feels indistinguishable from identity. Tasks, roles, responsibilities, expectations layer themselves quietly until simply being alive feels like something that must be earned. Even rest is often treated as conditional, allowed only after effort, granted only when productivity has been satisfied. But the cosmos does not recognize this exchange. It does not trade worth for output. It allows existence first without negotiation. In the solar system, nothing is required to prove its usefulness before being allowed to remain. A distant object drifting in the outer darkness does not need to serve a purpose to justify its orbit. Its presence is sufficient. Its continued motion is not questioned. This is not indifference. It is neutrality so complete that it becomes nurturing. When obligation fades, the mind responds cautiously at first. It waits for the next instruction, the next internal demand. Old habits of vigilance linger, scanning for what must be done next. But gradually, as nothing arrives, the nervous system begins to trust the quiet. It learns that stillness is not a trap, that rest is not a mistake. The night supports this learning. Darkness removes cues. The absence of activity signals safety. There is no schedule embedded in the stars, no expectation written into the sky. Time continues, but it does not lean forward. It does not ask you to keep up. Existing without obligation does not mean disengaging from life. It means releasing the constant sense of being evaluated by it. The universe is not grading your experience. It is not keeping a record. It does not need you to be better, faster, calmer, or wiser in this moment. It allows you to be exactly as you are because that is already enough for existence to continue. This realization often brings a soft wave of relief through the body. Muscles loosen slightly. The jaw unclenches. The breath deepens without being directed. These are not techniques. They are responses. The body knows what it feels like when nothing is expected of it. In cosmic terms, most of existence happens without witnesses. Vast regions of space remain unseen, unmeasured, unnamed. They do not wait for observation to validate them. They exist quietly, carrying on without acknowledgement. This is not neglect, it is freedom. Human consciousness often struggles with this idea because it has been trained to equate attention with value. If something is not noticed, it feels as though it might not matter. But the universe demonstrates a different relationship between presence and importance. Things matter because they exist, not because they are observed. As awareness rests here without obligation, you may notice that identity itself softens. You are not being a role. You are not performing a function. You are not moving toward a goal. You are simply present. This simplicity can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling at first, but beneath that unfamiliarity is ease. The solar system does not have to reinvent itself each day. It does not wake with anxiety about relevance. Its continuity does not depend on novelty. It depends on consistency, and consistency does not require effort once established. It becomes natural. Existing without obligation allows the mind to step out of rehearsal. There is no future conversation to prepare for, no past moment to replay in search of correction. The present becomes enough to occupy awareness fully, without strain. If thoughts arise now, they do so gently. They do not push. They do not demand response. They appear more like passing weather than urgent messages. This change in tone is not accidental. It reflects a deeper shift in how the mind relates to itself when pressure is removed. The universe does not apologize for taking up space. It does not justify its expansion. It does not explain why it exists. It simply does. And that unapologetic existence is not aggressive. It is quiet, unassuming, stable. Perhaps this is one of the most restorative lessons cosmic scale offers. You do not need permission to exist. You do not need to earn rest. You do not need to be useful in this moment to be allowed to remain. Night is particularly good at teaching this lesson because it removes context. In darkness, status fades. Comparison loses clarity. The world narrows to simple sensations: breathing, weight, silence. These things do not ask anything of you. As this chapter continues without agenda, it invites you to rest not only physically, but existentially, to let go of the subtle belief that something must be accomplished before peace is deserved. The solar system continues its slow, patient motion, regardless of what you do next. It does not wait for your understanding. It does not require your participation. And somehow, knowing this does not diminish you. It frees you. If sleep arrives, it will arrive without having to be earned. If wakefulness remains, it can remain without purpose. Both states are acceptable here. Both are supported by a universe that does not impose obligation. And so this space remains open, quiet, unmeasured, unconditional. In a universe where existence itself is never required to justify its presence, what might it feel like to let yourself exist the same way, even if only for the rest of this night? There is a gentle moment, deep into long contemplation, when the desire to be distinct begins to fade. Not erased, not denied, but simply no longer necessary. The universe does not emphasize individuality the way human culture does. It does not spotlight each object and ask it to justify its uniqueness. Instead, it allows everything to become part of a larger background, a vast continuity where presence matters more than distinction. And within that continuity, something deeply soothing begins to unfold. In the solar system, most objects are not dramatic. They do not have names. They do not appear in textbooks or documentaries. Countless particles drift silently, following paths set long ago, never drawing attention, never needing to. And yet, the system would not be what it is without them. They contribute not by standing out, but by belonging. Human anxiety often grows from the feeling that one must remain visible to remain real. That fading into the background means being forgotten, overlooked, erased. But the cosmos offers a different interpretation. To be part of the background is not to disappear. It is to be held within something larger that does not require constant self-assertion. When you look up at the night sky, you do not see individual photons. you see a glow, a texture, a depth. Meaning emerges not from isolating each point of light, but from allowing them to merge into an impression vast enough to quiet the mind. The background is where awe lives. It is where scale becomes felt rather than measured. As awareness rests here, the sense of needing to define yourself precisely may begin to soften. Labels lose their urgency, roles loosen. Identity becomes less like a task and more like a presence. You do not need to be sharply outlined to exist meaningfully. The universe itself is mostly gradients, transitions, and blended regions. In space, boundaries are rarely clear. Atmospheres fade gradually. Gravitational influence weakens slowly. Light dims without abruptness. The background is not empty. It is layered, complex, alive with subtle motion. Becoming part of it is not a loss. It is a form of integration. This idea can feel counterintuitive to a mind trained to seek distinction, to be noticed, to be defined, to be someone rather than something diffuse. But the cosmos does not organize itself around individual prominence. It organizes itself around balance, around relationships, around patterns that only emerge when many things coexist without competing for attention. When you no longer need to stand out, effort falls away. Performance becomes unnecessary. There is no audience here, no comparison, no hierarchy of importance, just existence unfolding at its own pace. The solar system does not highlight one moment over another. Most of its time is spent in quiet continuity. Orbits repeat. Distances remain stable. Nothing announces itself as special, and yet everything participates in a structure that has endured for billions of years. Endurance, not visibility, is what matters here. As the night deepens, you may notice that thoughts about how you are perceived lose their grip. Concerns about how you appear to others, how you measure up, how you fit into narratives beyond this moment, begin to fade. This is not resignation. It is rest from self-monitoring. The universe does not monitor itself. It does not check whether it is being observed correctly. It does not adjust its behavior to meet expectation. It simply is. And in that being, it finds stability far greater than anything that could be achieved through constant correction. Becoming part of the background allows awareness to widen without strain. You do not have to hold your shape tightly. You can soften at the edges. You can blend with the quiet. Nothing essential is lost when you do. In fact, many things become possible only then. Calm deepens. Breath settles. The mind stops rehearsing explanations. Silence grows comfortable rather than awkward. This is not withdrawal. It is alignment with a broader rhythm that does not require individuality to be defended at every moment. If sleep approaches now, it may feel less like slipping away and more like merging. Consciousness does not vanish abruptly. It diffuses. Like starlight scattering across space, awareness spreads thinly until it is no longer focused anywhere in particular, and that diffusion is gentle. The fear of disappearing is deeply human, but it is not cosmic. The universe does not disappear when it becomes quiet. It becomes more itself. The background is not where things end. It is where they are sustained. As this chapter lingers without insistence, there is no need to remember it clearly. Like the background of the night sky, its effect is subtle. It works not by standing out, but by surrounding. And so, without asking anything more of you, this moment invites a final softening, a willingness to let go of the need to be distinct, defined, or directed. In a universe where most of what exists lives quietly in the background, what might it feel like to allow yourself to rest there too, just for now, without needing to stand apart from the calm? There is a gentle moment, deep into long contemplation, when the desire to be distinct begins to fade. Not erased, not denied, but simply no longer necessary. The universe does not emphasize individuality the way human culture does. It does not spotlight each object and ask it to justify its uniqueness. Instead, it allows everything to become part of a larger background, a vast continuity where presence matters more than distinction. And within that continuity, something deeply soothing begins to unfold. In the solar system, most objects are not dramatic. They do not have names. They do not appear in textbooks or documentaries. Countless particles drift silently, following paths set long ago, never drawing attention, never needing to. And yet the system would not be what it is without them. They contribute not by standing out, but by belonging. Human anxiety often grows from the feeling that one must remain visible to remain real. That fading into the background means being forgotten, overlooked, erased. But the cosmos offers a different interpretation. To be part of the background is not to disappear. It is to be held within something larger that does not require constant self-assertion. When you look up at the night sky, you do not see individual photons. You see a glow, a texture, a depth. Meaning emerges not from isolating each point of light, but from allowing them to merge into an impression vast enough to quiet the mind. The background is where all lives. It is where scale becomes felt rather than measured. As awareness rests here, the sense of needing to define yourself precisely may begin to soften. Labels lose their urgency. Roles loosen. Identity becomes less like a task and more like a presence. You do not need to be sharply outlined to exist meaningfully. The universe itself is mostly gradients, transitions, and blended regions. In space, boundaries are rarely clear. Atmospheres fade gradually. Gravitational influence weakens slowly. Light dims without abruptness. The background is not empty. It is layered, complex, alive with subtle motion. Becoming part of it is not a loss. It is a form of integration. This idea can feel counterintuitive to a mind trained to seek distinction, to be noticed, to be defined, to be someone, rather than something diffuse. But the cosmos does not organize itself around individual prominence. It organizes itself around balance, around relationships, around patterns that only emerge when many things coexist without competing for attention. When you no longer need to stand out, effort falls away. Performance becomes unnecessary. There is no audience here, no comparison, no hierarchy of importance, just existence unfolding at its own pace. The solar system does not highlight one moment over another. Most of its time is spent in quiet continuity. Orbits repeat. Distances remain stable. Nothing announces itself as special, and yet everything participates in a structure that has endured for billions of years. Endurance, not visibility, is what matters here. As the night deepens, you may notice that thoughts about how you are perceived lose their grip. Concerns about how you appear to others, how you measure up, how you fit into narratives beyond this moment, begin to fade. This is not resignation. It is rest from self-monitoring. The universe does not monitor itself. It does not check whether it is being observed correctly. It does not adjust its behavior to meet expectation. It simply is. And in that being, it finds stability far greater than anything that could be achieved through constant correction. Becoming part of the background allows awareness to widen without strain. You do not have to hold your shape tightly. You can soften at the edges. You can blend with the quiet. Nothing essential is lost when you do. In fact, many things become possible only then. Calm deepens. Breath settles. The mind stops rehearsing explanations. Silence grows comfortable rather than awkward. This is not withdrawal. It is alignment with a broader rhythm that does not require individuality to be defended at every moment. If sleep approaches now, it may feel less like slipping away and more like merging. Consciousness does not vanish abruptly. It diffuses. Like starlight scattering across space, awareness spreads thinly until it is no longer focused anywhere in particular, and that diffusion is gentle. The fear of disappearing is deeply human, but it is not cosmic. The universe does not disappear when it becomes quiet. It becomes more itself. The background is not where things end. it is where they are sustained. As this chapter lingers without insistence, there is no need to remember it clearly. Like the background of the night sky, its effect is subtle. It works not by standing out, but by surrounding. And so, without asking anything more of you, this moment invites a final softening, a willingness to let go of the need to be distinct, defined, or directed. In a universe where most of what exists lives quietly in the background, what might it feel like to allow yourself to rest there too, just for now, without needing to stand apart from the calm? There is a gentle moment, deep into long contemplation, when the desire to be distinct begins to fade. Not erased, not denied, but simply no longer necessary. The universe does not emphasize individuality the way human culture does. It does not spotlight each object and ask it to justify its uniqueness. Instead, it allows everything to become part of a larger background, a vast continuity where presence matters more than distinction. And within that continuity, something deeply soothing begins to unfold. In the solar system, most objects are not dramatic. They do not have names. They do not appear in textbooks or documentaries. Countless particles drift silently, following paths set long ago, never drawing attention, never needing to. And yet, the system would not be what it is without them. They contribute not by standing out, but by belonging. Human anxiety often grows from the feeling that one must remain visible to remain real, that fading into the background means being forgotten, overlooked, erased. But the cosmos offers a different interpretation. To be part of the background is not to disappear. It is to be held within something larger that does not require constant self-assertion. When you look up at the night sky, you do not see individual photons. You see a glow, a texture, a depth. Meaning emerges not from isolating each point of light, but from allowing them to merge into an impression vast enough to quiet the mind. The background is where awe lives. It is where scale becomes felt rather than measured. As awareness rests here, the sense of needing to define yourself precisely may begin to soften. Labels lose their urgency. Roles loosen. Identity becomes less like a task and more like a presence. You do not need to be sharply outlined to exist meaningfully. The universe itself is mostly gradients, transitions, and blended regions. In space, boundaries are rarely clear. Atmospheres fade gradually. Gravitational influence weakens slowly. Light dims without abruptness. The background is not empty. It is layered, complex, alive with subtle motion. Becoming part of it is not a loss. It is a form of integration. This idea can feel counterintuitive to a mind trained to seek distinction, to be noticed, to be defined, to be someone rather than something diffuse. But the cosmos does not organize itself around individual prominence. It organizes itself around balance, around relationships, around patterns that only emerge when many things coexist without competing for attention. When you no longer need to stand out, effort falls away. Performance becomes unnecessary. There is no audience here, no comparison, no hierarchy of importance, just existence unfolding at its own pace. The solar system does not highlight one moment over another. Most of its time is spent in quiet continuity. Orbits repeat. Distances remain stable. Nothing announces itself as special, and yet everything participates in a structure that has endured for billions of years. Endurance, not visibility, is what matters here. As the night deepens, you may notice that thoughts about how you are perceived lose their grip. Concerns about how you appear to others, how you measure up, how you fit into narratives beyond this moment, begin to fade. This is not resignation. It is rest from self-monitoring. The universe does not monitor itself. It does not check whether it is being observed correctly. It does not adjust its behavior to meet expectation. It simply is. And in that being it finds stability far greater than anything that could be achieved through constant correction. Becoming part of the background allows awareness to widen without strain. You do not have to hold your shape tightly. You can soften at the edges. You can blend with the quiet. Nothing essential is lost when you do. In fact, many things become possible only then. Calm deepens. Breath settles. The mind stops rehearsing explanations. Silence grows comfortable rather than awkward. This is not withdrawal, it is alignment with a broader rhythm that does not require individuality to be defended at every moment. If sleep approaches now, it may feel less like slipping away and more like merging.